Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. This is a very ambitious meetup. It's kind of at the edge of my capacity. I don't know whether I can actually do a good job, but I'm going to try. I did a meetup on the common themes in the Bible, the Gita, and Dao. Tried my best to identify common themes. It was quite stunning. And I found myself using Louis Sullivan's principle of form follows function in order to understand several of the points that I was making in commonality. So what I'm going to do today is very unusual. I'm actually going to go through the same slides. I have added one thing. I've added this one diagram, which actually replaces all the other diagrams. So I'm going to go through all the slides exactly as they were. I think I've shortened some of them, removed some of them, but basically I'm going to cover all the slides very quickly in maybe 10 minutes or less. And I'm going to relate it to this diagram. And then I have just one slide summarizing this diagram, with this diagram explaining everything. And we'll spend most of our time there talking about all the patterns that I've seen in the Bible, Gita, and the Dao. And then I'm going to give myself a test for the diagram. I've designed a very elaborate test. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to talk about the future diagram, a future direction for this diagram, where I'm going to take these meetups. And most importantly, all new questions from you. So whatever questions you had, many of you have attended the meetup, many of you watched the video, most of you actually have either attended the meetup or watched the video, the previous meetup. So any questions from that or any questions as we go through? Again, as always, the standard issue for these meetups is pen and paper. So please use pen and paper to keep track of all the questions that you have. And we will have, once we are done, we are going to have plenty of time. I'll take as many questions as you folks have. All right, so that's the plan. Let me get started. This was the first slide I put in, saying that there are two things. There is the spirit and there is matter. There is God and there is the world. There is the Tao, and there are 10,000 things. I represented the spirit, God, the Tao by yellow star, and the world, 10,000 things, the manifestations by this green circle. And it is this relationship. This is actually the metaphysical, the core metaphysical, what is there. What I've done is that it is the same yellow over here and the green over here. But you can see that they are closely connected with the red and the blue. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the same themes. When we come to the main diagram, that one slide that I have summarizing everything, we will reiterate these themes. I just want to place these diagrams in this diagram right now. Next, I made the point that in the scribal tradition, before the modern times, and in all these three religions, the I am is a huge part, an individual soul, Atma, the center, the Tao in you, consciousness, the deepest part of you, your capacity to love, that core in you is a core part of the entire system of thought. So there is the Tao, there is that I am in you, there is the world, and then there is the spirit of God, the Tao, Krishna, Brahman, whatever you want to call it. So this left side is the I. If I want to put the star over here, I would put it right here in this corner of the yellow, but I'm expanding the I. And this entire quadrant, so this entire left is you, and this side is what I was trying to get at from this side, on this second star, the other. You can call it the other person, you can call it God, you can call it society, that is this side, okay? Another critical point I made was that about functionated forms. The idea that Jesus is 100% God and 100% man. The spirituality of the material. The heaven on earth. The Krishna incarnated on earth as an avatar. So this combination of the spiritual and material. It continues to be the theme here. So it is combination of the yellow and green. But that combination happens through these other things. In this diagram, I focused on the red and the blue. The best statement of that is in the Chinese philosophy of yin and yang. There is the concentrating element, which is the yang, the word, jnana or knowledge. This is induction, this is science, this is a formal cause, this is thinking. And then there is the other side, which is more receptive. Yin, love, bhakti, devotion, application, art, final cause, feeling. Now you can see in this diagram, they are there. But just as, if you look at this diagram, I use the traditional yin-yang diagram. And these two are kind of afterthoughts. They try to show the positions, but it's kind of superimposed on that. In these diagrams, they have become an integral part of it. So the red goes to the blue through green, and green goes through the yellow to red. So they are interposed between them to make the integration more. In one sense, this actually captures this diagram most directly, the I-thou diagram. The left side is the I, and the right side is the thou, is you. So this is your I, and this is the other person you're looking at. This is your I, this is entire of the society. This is your I, this can be your family. This is your I, this can be God. You can also, so that's what the mapping of this is. So this diagram is directly mapped into this. All right, so now let me come to the main diagram. Let me see how we're doing on time, 2:30. Okay, I had a few more slides. I'd said that, after talking about I-thou, I'd said that it's not just one person. There are many of us. There are 8 billion of us. And you have the potential of interacting with them. So the way in which this diagram does it is that instead of putting many such things, which is very easy, very hard to think about, here you can put an X here and a Y here. In the beginning, you just put I here all the time, and you can talk about your relationship to any one person, any group, any culture, any time, any book, or God himself. Alternatively, you can also think in terms of the relationship between any two of these, either an individual. So you can talk about two other individuals, one here and one here. So this allows you to flexibly think about relationships between both individuals, two individuals, or individual and cultures, or cultures and cultures. So that's what this diagram does. I had this very colorful diagram of trying to capture the relationships, the actual interactions, because the previous one was that just there are people, but there are enormously difficult, and I just kind of put together something. This is not a very good diagram, just put, I just put everything there. But this other diagram now allows us to actually think about many of those relationships using the single diagram, okay? So that's what I'm trying to do. So what I'm asking this diagram to do is a lot. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to now go to that one slide. This is the slide. So we're going to remain on this slide for a long time. And we are going to talk, I'm going to talk through some of the themes that I talked about before. I will add some more observations about the diagram, and we'll go from there. So let me work out some of the same things that I worked out before. Let's look at the story of the New Testament. This is the Father. Okay, God so loved the world. So this is the God, this is the world. The yellow is the God, green is the world. So I'm talking about these first four things here, first four. So God so loved the world that he sent his only son. What is his only son? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and Word was God. So that is Jesus. That's the Word. So God sent the Word to the world. Okay. Folks, there will be plenty of time for questions. Just hold off. You can put something in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and ignore all the chat for now, but I'm going to we can look at all of it afterwards. So I'm going to disable the chat for now. What we can do is we'll have plenty of, I'll open it up as soon as I'm done with the presentation, because I don't want to be distracted by the presentation. Please use pen and paper to keep track of everything, and we will deal with all questions all at once, okay? So God so loved the world that he sent his only son, okay? And what is the purpose of it? To transform the world and to create in the world this red love for God, which is what Holy Spirit is. Okay, so this is the story. This is God so loved the world that he sent his only son to the world in order to create Holy Spirit in the hearts of people, which is the love of God. So this is the loop like this in the New Testament. Okay. The Tao talks about it in a very different way. Tao is this. This is the spirit of the world. The principle governing the world. That is the yellow. And these are the 10,000 things. Tao is very skeptical of the word. It is focused on saying, keep your attention on the Tao, develop love for the Tao, and go to Tao like this from here. So its method of doing that is different than the New Testament. At the same time, in the Chinese tradition, the yang and yin and the dance between them as being crucial for life is also a part of that tradition. So that's the second line here. The third line is the Indian tradition, And that's the one that I understand the least, actually, in terms of, so I'm just going to make one observation about it. There is a lot more to be said because I need to take in all of the Indian thought and try to put it in this form. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I don't have, just like I don't understand the Chinese thought, Indian thought also I understand only somewhat. But I want to focus on just one aspect of the Indian thought, and that there are 4 kinds of yoga that we talk about in the Indian tradition. There is the Jnana Yoga, which is this blue. There is the Bhakti Yoga, which is the same as love for God. That is the red. There is the Karma Yoga, doing things in the world. And then there is a Raja Yoga, which is to focus your attention on the core of you, your Atma, and the God at the same time. And there are 4 separate traditions of how to do that. And all of them lead to God. And all of them are related to each other. So the Indian tradition talks about each of these separately in detail and talks about the connections between them. If you want to put it in philosophical terms, in terms of ancient philosophy, this is the truth. This is the ideal. When you apply the truth to the world, to the real, using ideal, what you produce is beauty. That's how you experience it. And what you feel is love. So this is truth, ideal, beauty, and love. We can look at the concepts of psychological functions by Carl Jung. This is intuition, of trying to intuit a vision of what is at the core of things. This is thinking. The blue is thinking. The green is the sensory world. And red is the world of feeling. He doesn't have it, he doesn't have the integration of all of this, but he has separated this out. And these colors I've been using from him. These are actually his colors that he came up with for each of those things. We can talk about these in terms of Aristotle's 4 causes. So Aquinas talks about the core idea, the core story of the New Testament in this way. He says, God is the efficient cause that is making everything move. The world is the material cause. Jesus or the word is showing you how to do it. It is producing the knowledge of doing that. It is giving you the form of how to do it. That's the formal cause. And the love and valuing of that produces in your heart, that is the final cause. So this is efficient, formal, material, and final cause. Okay, so these are the ones. There is also a way of thinking about it in terms of a family, which is very powerful, which is done very commonly in the Chinese tradition. So this is the father, this is the mother, this is the son, and this is the daughter. I won't go into that much because I did not talk about it previously. Okay. Now, Louis Sullivan's principle is form follows function, but I want to add 2 things to that. because form follows functions is only about two things. It's about the spirit and the material. So form follows material by principle. It is this principle. His principle of form follows function actually is the thing that is used. That's how. That is the blue, the principle, or principles as such. That is making world divine, or making world in accordance with truth. And with sympathy. And the sympathy is both ways. It's the sympathy of the world for the spirit and of spirit for the world. So sympathy is a very large concept, and it is expressed in different ways. This is love or Holy Spirit in Christianity. It's the yin in Chinese thinking, in Taoist thinking. It's bhakti in the Indian thinking. It is love in the philosophical tradition. It is feeling in Carl Jung's thought. It is the final cause. So that's the issue of sympathy. So form follows function. So that integrates all these four things. Let me see what I have here. Okay, I'm going to, okay, what I want to do, so this is a quick overview of what we have done so far. Okay, and I was actually very excited about this diagram. I am very excited about this diagram because I've been working on these themes for a long time. They're actually, I mean, it's really long time. I have been working on it at least for 4 years or so. You will notice that the logo of 52 Living Ideas has these four colors in a circle. That was my version of doing that. I've done at least 15 different presentations on these 4 colors. But I think it is being brought together now much better. And the core insights were given by these works of how do you bring this together? Because each of these works, the Bible, Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, are doing that in a different way. And that way of bringing things together is actually very foreign to the modern mind. That is why, though Carl Jung identifies these 4 things, no matter how hard I've worked on that, I've never been able to bring them together. How do these work together? Because modern world is very fragmented and it doesn't think in this integrated way. It just focuses mostly on these 2. Modern world is focused on, it is subjectivist, focused on people's emotions, and it is focused on the material. So it is focused only on those 2 things. So it is not that spiritual. And its thinking is not as integrative. And certainly it's not this kind of thinking, which is the word, which is about ideal. Okay, it is not focused on this. Its thinking is very much close to this part. It never goes further up. So I said, okay, this looks very promising. So let me give it the hardest test I can. So what I did was I said, okay, of these 4, what is it that I understand the least? Let me focus on that. And let me focus on it in the most comprehensive way I possibly can in a short period of time. The one that I understand the list of how it is put together is this ideal, is the word. It can't be one of these 2 because that is there in the modern world. It has to be one of these 2. We have focused a lot with these 3. They largely start from here and focus on this heavily. So I said, let me pick something over here in the blue. And the core idea there is that of virtue. That is really what Jesus says is virtue. Actually, this yang is wrong. It should be the. It is the way that is here. Jnana Yoga, that is the virtue of knowledge, the ideal. This is what virtue is about. So I said, let me look at virtue. Now, the great thing is that I've done a lot of work on this 52 in the 103 Great Ideas, which is part of the great books of the Western world. They have a Syntopicon where they ask the question, they collected all the thinkers of the West and asked the question, what do these people think about? And they have these nice little essays on each of the topics. So I said, let me look at the topic on virtue. So last night, and this was just last night after saying, okay, this presentation looks good, but let me give it a test. So that was what I started out with. And it was given that we're all, in New York, we are homebound with the Omicron. This was a great way of starting a new year. So I said, okay, let me look at virtue. And so I read through the entire chapter on virtue and identified all the questions. Okay, these are all the questions that are asked by thinkers throughout the history on virtue. And I said, okay, can I give a quick test in 10 minutes? Can I answer all these questions using this diagram? So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So what is virtue? Virtue is primarily over here in blue. It is a set of principles that are consistent with you going to your highest good, that are built into your habits, and that you are fully motivated about. So those are principles which are fully internalized in your actions, in your emotions, that take you towards the highest good. So it covers all these four. It's an integrative thing. What are the four cardinal virtues? The four cardinal virtues are temperance, which is about this red, managing the red, making sure that it is pointing towards the overall good. It is about courage. That means courage to take the action. That's the green. It is about prudence. That means how to use your reason in a practical way to manage all these four. So wait a minute. So now we have only up to 3. So where is the 4th? And that is the most powerful virtue, and that is the justice. What the justice is that whatever virtue you have here, this is you, and this is society. It has to be consistent. It has to be right for you and right for the society. So that's what justice is, to make sure that these two, the left half and the right half, are properly aligned in a win-win arrangement. That's what justice does. Okay. Now you can see that one is missing, and that is the yellow, which the Greeks never talked about. That's what Christianity does. All the 3 virtues of Christianity, faith, hope, and charity. Aquinas summarizes them very beautifully. He says that they are all about the love of God. And that's right here. So those are the, I'm putting them all together as one, as love of God over here. So those are the virtues. Okay. What is the difference between the modern and ancient conceptions of virtue? Again, when you look, and this is where the essay starts out, by making the observation that the modern conception of virtue is far narrower conception than the ancient conception. Whatever I just recounted to you is the ancient conception of virtue. The modern conception is about just saying whether your emotions and your actions, so just this red and green, are consonant with the societal values of how other people feel and do. So it is about just relative places of all of this. That is the only conception. That is the prominent way in which people think of virtue in the modern times. So you can see how profound this is, that in a single diagram, we can talk about all of this so far. How is virtue acquired? What is the role of habit and knowledge in acquiring virtue? Again, you read Aristotle, so you start very early through example by training emotions of a child, of knowing what is, to love things which are good and hate things which are bad. As you grow older, you move to explicit principles. That's the blue. And those blue principles are pointing you towards the yellow. And then you have to create habits, which is about making the blue and the red, the ones that you learned through imitation and example, and ones that you learned explicitly, into green. That means in your physical actions in the world. So that is how virtues are acquired. What is the good of virtue? Good of virtue is to firstly have all these four acting properly in your life to make your life good, and do that fully consistently with the community, with the world together. So it's the how of how you achieve a good life. What is the relationship between virtue and happiness? Now, again, this is a tricky question, because the happiness as conceived by the ancients like Aristotle, eudaimonia, includes all the four. The modern conception of happiness is mostly red and somewhat green. It is about how you're feeling and what is your material state. Whereas the conception of happiness is simply like people, like Stoics would say that it is in pursuing of the virtue that you are happy. The consciousness of you pursuing the virtue and seeing people around you, be virtuous, you be happy. Aristotle adds that in the process, you do need the external goods in order to keep doing that. The Epicureans would say that happiness is a concomitant of this. So all of it is like virtue and happiness for the ancients are all of these four things put together. Okay, so this is how. So this was a test, and by the way, I'm going to do a full meetup on this tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, not on this diagram, but on answers that have been given to these questions throughout the history by all the thinkers. So I have a full presentation on that. That's going to be at 9 o'clock. That's what I prepared to kind of compare it to whatever I've said right now, of trying to see what everybody has thought about this. So that's going to be at 9 o'clock tomorrow. And Kevin suggested I name the diagram. The previous diagram I did not think deserved a name, but I think this one does. So actually, I'm going to do a series of meetup. I'm calling them Quinqwe Unum. So from the 5-1. Okay, now the question is why 5? Okay, because, and that has been the error, my error in the past and most people's error. There are 4 faculties that we have, but we have to integrate them for ourselves and for others. That is the virtue of justice. That's the fifth one. So it is temperance. I mean, if you want to put it in terms of virtues, it is temperance, courage, prudence, love of God, and justice. So those five. So I'm going to use that as the theme for the presentations. And my plan is I'm going to be talking about virtue itself. I'll be looking not about my thoughts, but about what everybody has thought about virtue tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And then I'm planning a series of meetups on this diagram. All right. So that's what I had. Let me see. I took about 40 minutes, maybe 35 minutes. Now I'm going to open it up for questions. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to ask any questions or comments about this. If you have any, I'm going to move back to this diagram, and I can take any questions on the diagram. You can zoom into any detail, anything that you want. I'm happy to answer any questions. You can either type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. Joe, what do you think?
I think it's excellent. I have a couple of questions. The one that doesn't seem to fit directly with me, to me, is sympathy. Is the one. I was wondering if you could explain why maybe you chose sympathy as one of those four principles. And then another question would be, how is vice at all thought of when it comes to this diagram?
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark to ask questions. So the first one on sympathy, this is a word that Louis Sullivan uses. So this read, right? I mean, let's talk about it in the context first of the Bible. This is the Holy Spirit. Okay, this is love of the world to God and God's love back. So this is the two-way. Now, the term that Louis Sullivan uses this is sympathy. That means to have a genuine caring for the core of the other person, or genuine feeling for life, towards the world, towards God. It's basically the act of your heart being open to something. So that's the word that he uses. So what I've done here is that all four words, I have tried to use the words that Louis Sullivan uses. I will not use these words going forward. Just for this presentation, I'm using this word. These words at the top are simply placeholders for all of these. So you're welcome to think of these in any of these, using any of these words. They are all kind of equivalent. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So in terms of vice, there are different kinds, because what happens is that like virtue is one. So there is one theme that I did not address on virtue, and that is that virtue one or many? Okay, and again, this diagram is a great way of seeing that, of saying that the virtue is many in the sense that there are all these different things. You have to engage your mind. You have to project ideal, hold on to the ideal. You have to transform the world. You have to have love in your heart, and you have to be focused on the ultimate good. And you have to do that you have to be doing that. And they are all interrelated. The term that Aquinas uses is that they flow into one another. I think the overflow is how he thinks of it, that they are separate, but they overflow into one another. So it's kind of like this kind of movement that is going on continuously between them. In terms of vice, there are vice of different kinds. So for each of the virtues, there is a corresponding vice. So for example, justice is where you are not treating other people as yourself. You're not fully respecting their spirit, their thought, their property, their feelings. So that would be on justice, of injustice of different kinds. Again, note that all these concepts in the ancient terms are much wider. So justice is not just about law. It is about treating, like they will be saying, okay, this is not a just way of treating a friend. That means you have a high standard of what is proper in human interaction. That's what justice is about. So that will be on justice. On temperance, it would be when you are indulging in emotions that are hurting you. In terms of courage, it would be when you are, through fear, not doing things that you should be doing. In terms of prudence, you are not applying the principles to concretes properly. In terms of lack of love of God, I'm using that as a placeholder for all the theological virtues that are captured here, is that you are not focused on the ultimate. You're getting distracted from that. So those would be kind of various ways in which vice is thought about. Right? Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? This is very surprising. There should be more questions. Are you going to deal with more of these vices? I'm going to do with more of these virtues, Judy. I'm going to do, I'm actually, the presentation on Monday is about virtue itself, but then I'm going to follow it up with the presentation on justice, temperance, courage, and prudence. And in that, I will have the opportunity of doing that. Next up is going to be David, Kevin, and Brian. David.
Yes, thanks, Shrikant. Very interesting presentation, insightful. I was curious if you could comment a little bit about the details of the geometry of this image. I mean, not just the pairing of the colors or but this specific sort of diamond-shaped triangles, if there's a specific meaning to, and the relative proportions of the blue and yellow versus the red and green.
Okay, excellent question. I'm using, this is the golden ratio that I'm using, because it is very scalable and it is, basically considered beautiful, and you can keep on adding to it. For example, if I add a square on this larger side, it remains as the same shape. That's the characteristic of the golden ratio. So I'm using the golden ratio. I'm putting, a fantastic question. So I'm using the golden ratio. This part is the older part, so I have given it a smaller part. This is actually our animal heritage, really. So I have given it a smaller part. This is the larger part, which is the characteristically human part. So that's why the yellow and blue are larger than this one. I have put the colors specifically. I have used Carl Jung's insight. There is certain colors evoke certain things. So blue evokes kind of thinking better than red. Red evokes emotion better. Green emotes, it kind of evokes kind of sensation better. And yellow evokes intuition better. So I've used those colors for that reason. So the overall proportion I wanted to use the golden ratio, because I see myself using like combination. I can show a spiral, for example. I can convert this into a spiral going out very easily. So I want to be able to experiment with that. So I've answered the questions over here. Then you can notice that this is brighter and this is darker. I have done that in order to distinguish between this is you and this is others. Others, you have to work a little bit in order to, you have to work quite a bit actually to get to other people as opposed to you. So I've used brighter and darker. So David, please go ahead and ask follow-ups if I've missed anything here.
Well, I was just trying to understand, I mean, again, it's a very interesting concept, and you're talking specifically about the, how to put it, but the transitions or the communication between these various four concepts. And so I'm still just, I'm
sure.
I mean, I'll say honestly, I find the
something more. Sorry, go ahead. I apologize. Go ahead.
No. Well, I mean, I guess what at least to me, maybe this is just how my mind works, and I don't know, maybe this is a little bit distracting for me. Is I mean, again, I understand the golden ratio and these and the colors and the shading. I mean, that sort of came across, but these, not so much the diagonals, but that you have, I mean, I understand that you want to say that certain forms or certain functions are specifically mediated by other things, but then having these corners connect and having these triangles is a little bit confusing to me.
David, let me explain the geometry here, okay? So one way of thinking about it is that these go in sequences, okay? So one way of thinking about it is, let's take the OODA loop, okay? So OODA loop is you're observing the world here, okay? So this side of it is the complete observance. And you're orienting, so you're actually thinking about what is going on. You are coming to a conclusion right here at the point where your orientation is complete, okay? So you're moving from the base here of observation. There is a large contact here between the sensory data and the thinking that you're doing about the sensory data. And then your concepts become more and more essentialized as you organize them. You go up here. And this entire thing is interacting with your intuitions. And then you take all the intuitions and bring it all together into a decision. So it comes down like this into a decision point. And that is going to actually unleash your action, which is this entire thing. And as you're acting on the world. And the actions, you're taking actions yourself, and they're going all into this world. And these actions, which are also coming from here, from the other person, other people, okay? So this green is being transformed from action from here, from others, and your own actions. And you're taking that in again here on this broad. You're trying to organize it, trying to form intuitions, bring the intuitions together into a decision and act again. So this is the way in which, for example, the OODA loop acts. The Bible story acts this way, but that's the kind of geometry that I'm thinking about as a base of it. And I'm introducing this diagram for the first time, and these are fantastic questions, okay? And this is exactly what I'm going to keep elaborating on in a series of meetups, which I'm going to call Quinqwe.
Okay, not okay. I'll let other people ask questions, but just one last thing. I can understand why, between you saying the I and the rest of the world, the I and the other, that the world, that the only interaction between I and other things would be through the world. You seem to be implying by this that the thinking is also a direct interaction, that my thinking and somebody else. And I'm maybe mean by word in terms of communication, speech, but I'm a little I'm trying to understand how thinking would actually directly connect.
Let me say, I'm saying that your intuition and your spirit, and so this is my spirit and your spirit, has very little, they are separate from each other. My spirit is mine, your spirit is yours. The actions that I'm taking and actions you're taking are also separate from each other. We act on the world together, so they interact a lot. And we are using words and writing. And it is that writing, especially writing and speech and the word. See, that is the power of the word. That is the power of knowledge. Civilization and interaction between people is held together by this interface and this interface. It is the commonality of the world that we are living in and the knowledge, the shared knowledge that we have that makes human interaction possible. David, but fantastic questions. And I look forward to expanding on all of this. Next up is Kevin. So it's going to be, let me just rattle off everybody here. It's going to be Kevin followed, oh, there's a lot of people. Let's start with Kevin. So it's going to be Kevin, Brian, Rupali, Jang, and Brian Allenby, and Ambika. Kevin.
Yeah, good Saturday, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Srilanka. My question about this diagram of 4 colors is this way. It could be the circular way, like circular diagram chart, like from center to out circle. And also could be a donut chart. Because one example could be, is this absolutely form follows function, or sometimes function follow form also? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. The thing is that I work with various, the diagrams have to achieve many things at once. And I've evaluated, I've been working with circular diagrams quite a bit. I've been working with this. This seems to have the maximum potential of doing connections. That's why I have chosen this one. The choice of diagram is based on the number of things you can do with it, a number of connections and number of interactions you can effectively capture in the most simplest way. So far, this is the best thing I have. Next up is Brian, followed by Rupali. Brian Nelson.
So first of all, I want to thank you for this. I'll tell you, the last time you presented with the 2 circles, I thought, this is what I've been looking for all these years. And all the rest is just detail now that we've got this. And then I slept very well that night. And I felt also a feeling of freedom and relief and liberation. It was like, it was something amazing. And now I feel the same way. This is really amazing.
Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. I feel the same way, because it's a way of bringing together so many things that are active in my mind. So thank you. Please go on.
The one question I'm looking forward to exploring in this is the dimension of time. How, and the thing that triggers this thought in my mind is that, and it's really based more on my reflections on Louis Sullivan, is that function changes over time. And a lot of these things the functions you have listed point towards the unchanging. So how does the time change and unchanging? I'm just going to be very interested in following that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great question. And again, I'm trying to put everything. The beautiful thing about this is that this is 2-dimensional. You can just put the 3rd dimension as time, and you can have a stack of these and seeing how things move as we go on. That's one possibility. The second possibility is a spiral, that it's a rotating one. So there are 2 or 3 different ways of doing that. I'm trying to first capture things. So, but I really like this point. Let me think about it a little bit more. I'm thinking of one of the things is like, you see this one diagram. If I had like a series of them at different times, right next to one another, that would be one way of capturing time. We're saying, okay, what is happening here over time? So that would be one way of doing that. But let me experiment with it. It's a profound question. Time is a huge, huge concept. And I definitely want to integrate that in the diagrams. But thank you, Brian. Next up is Rupali.
Thank you, Shrikant. This is a great way to start a new year.
Yes, Happy New Year, Rupali.
To everyone, and to you too, Shrikant. So this, I have a few questions. One, I'm going to piggyback on what Joe said before about vice. And you had mentioned during the conversation about virtues that it's important to teach ideals and virtues at a young age so that children can internalize those principles at a younger age, and then those principles then form their actions. So what happens if, the ideal is missing in education or in their upbringing? How does the form change, or how do the actions change? One thing that I felt was in sympathy, love would become hate or vice in that case. And so that was one thing I wanted to kind of just throw out there. And the second was, I've been trying to apply this form follows function and your model of the 4 elements in how to run an organization, or and do you have any thoughts about that? How to apply these 4 elements in daily life or in an organization so that it is an integrated, harmonious being by itself and not fragmented, as you mentioned before.
Wonderful, great questions, Rupali. The question about organization, I'm completely incompetent to answer, so I will not even try. You have a far greater experience running organizations. And so I can just describe it to you in some way. I mean, the core ideas, but I don't know. It's too far for me. And I don't have enough experience to be able to do a good job on that. On the first question of education, the problem is far more deeper as I'm understanding it. What has happened is that there is something really wrong in the modern time. What has happened is that, like, in the culture, ideals are missing. In the culture, the core of spirit is missing as a part of the communication. When I'm looking at time, in the ancient times, all thinkers, okay, regardless of their differences, all thought that all these 4 things are obviously operative, obviously important, and they were trying to see what is the relative positions and relative interactions of all of them. All the people, like this is Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, Epicurus, just they had all kinds of differences, but all thought that all these 4 things work. We are living in a time where these 2 are not really there in the culture. So it is not a simple task. It is at the level of culture. So what Rupali, the most interesting thing was that I was going through this essay on virtue, and I noticed something very interesting, that people, all the thinkers, all the modern thinkers after print, so that is after Chaucer in this, they really have nothing to say on virtue. Everything that they have to say is either wrong, very partial, or completely useless, or just regurgitation of something in the past. They really have nothing to say. So one of the experiments I'm going to do is that this time I'm going to go through 1 or 3 great ideas in these virtues, just looking at the ancients, because I think just looking at that, it allows you to retrieve what was it meant to be using all these four things. The Center for the Study of Digital Life, Mark Stallman, has been making this point that the scribal sensibility is different, that you're using all the four causes, right? He's saying we've lost the formal cause. We've lost this. We have lost the what Aquinas would call efficient cause here, of basically the spirit in you. And it's like, if you're not acting from the core of you, you're missing something. If you're just going to react, it's not going to get you there. So the problem is of that magnitude. And the way I don't have any answers. The way I'm starting is to do the review of all the virtues. So I'll be doing a series of meetups on the virtues, and I will try to, at the end, I'll first present all the questions. Then I'll present all the answers provided only by the ancients. Then we'll open it up to discussion. And then I will give my take on all the questions for that particular virtue using the diagram. And hopefully with that, I will learn a little bit better how to answer the question that you're raising. It's a very important question, but it has to be answered at that level, at a cultural level. Thank you, Rupali. Next up is Jen.
Yeah, so I think the theory looks good, but I have problem with this graphic. Mm-hmm. First, the color. You mentioned it from Carl Jung. Carl Jung is very traditional way of art. The color is very primary color, so they very contrast to each other. They lack that kind of harmony. I think the color, if you have a little bit mixed, like not so bright color, they usually goes together better. The second
Jen, can you do me a favor? Can you email me something which you propose are better colors?
Okay,
I will
sure.
consider
I
them.
can try that. Yeah.
Thanks.
The second is the line, the straight line. Because these things they usually go between each other, but the straight line somehow form this hard boundary, so they don't really help them to go between each other. So I think that's my challenge to look at this graphic.
Absolutely. Like, if you'll remember that my previous graphics were all with curved lines. And this one is all with straight lines. There are advantages to one and advantages to the other. And I will have to work on that. This time I'm struggling to just capture the identities of each of them. There is actually so much behind these. Like, for example, what is justice? What does justice mean? To be able to talk about it at this point, even just doing this with the straight lines is very hard for me. So once I have mastered that, maybe it will become fluid in my own mind that I can apply it in that way. Currently, I'm just struggling to just grasp the basics here.
Yeah, I think use graphics to express very hard. So word is much easier than graphic, because graphic talk to you all different levels.
Yes, and I do think that it's in one sense it is very hard. In one sense it is very easy, because you're kind of working with all the relationships, and you say, oh no, I need to change that because it doesn't quite capture the relationship. So you're able to work on all the things together at once. So I really appreciate both your feedback, continual feedback. David Adelson had great points on that. And I appreciate that one part of it is that, the graphic actually has to capture everything that is going on in the mind, all the relationships. And that I have to make it very explicit and communicate to the other person. The second thing is that there are some options that are there of like equivalent graphics that two people can come up with slightly different graphics. And then there are some objective criteria of that, like flowing line is easier to show the transitions, whereas a straight line is easier to make the distinctions clearer. And so I look forward to working with you folks to keep perfecting it. Thank you, Jane. Next up is going to be Brian Allenby. followed by Ambika. Brian.
I apologize if
Brian, your sound is not very good.
Is that better?
Much better. Go ahead.
Good. It's how I hold the iPad that's a problem with my thumb. Okay. So as I say, I apologize if I've missed this in the presentation, but there are 3 points. The first one is in the function block, we have father appearing twice. I wondered if I just missed something, or is there a reason for that?
Okay. What is the second one?
The second one is in the sympathy block, we have love appearing twice. Same question.
Okay.
And my third one regards to the various causes. I think in principle and form, I fully understand what the cause is referring to there, but in function and sympathy, I'm confused.
Got it. Okay, so first one, what I'm doing is that this is not a list. This is actually, each of these are 4. Like, for example, the first one comes from Bible. First point comes from Bible. And I'm using the terminology that the Bible would use. So it's Father, Word, World, and Love. Love, or you can call it Holy Spirit. So I'm not really looking if it is repeated. I'm just trying to capture it. So here the Father is in the context of God the Father. Here Father is Father in the family. Here love is equivalent to Holy Spirit. Here love is understood in philosophy.
Okay.
And what was the last point? It was about causes.
It's about causes.
These causes, these are basically, this is the way in which Aquinas captures the application of Aristotle's causes to the world. What he's saying is that it's this principle which is the efficient cause. That means the way he will put it is that God has created and is keeping the world going. So in that sense, he's the efficient cause. And the final cause is basically the thing that you aim at. So what the Holy Spirit produces is you aiming at, you desiring, you seeking the end of being united with God. So I'm using these, but the main point I'm trying to make here is that analyzing anything from these 4 causes is a very powerful way of understanding things, which you cannot get by just looking at the material cause. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Next up is Ambika, followed by Jyoti. Ambika.
Actually, it's quite exciting to see what you have started here. And when you talked about the golden mean, the spiral, and how each segment feeds each other, I was seeing little spirals going back and forth, and I thought of all of them as seeds. And then, of course, I started to draw, and of course, the spiral going up and down keeps the whole thing dynamic. Mm-hmm. And I did wonder about love and love, but it was clear when you explained it earlier to us. And I also thought of generativity, to generate, to create. And then, of course, my mind goes to how to manifest this in our schools, because that's been a driving force for so many of us to talk about. So I hope we'll have that conversation.
Thank you. That we will do it separately. But thank you very much, Ambika. Really appreciate it. Next up is going to be Jyoti, followed by Ginny. Jyoti.
Oh, did you mean Jyoti, me, or
whoever typed? Yeah, yes, that's right. Jyoti, you.
Oh, okay. Because there are many Jyotis here. let's see. So I had
there can't be too many jyotis. Jyotis are like light,
I know it's the
yes.
glow of light.
Yes.
So I'm not saying there are too many. I'm just saying there are many at this point.
Yes.
No judgment.
Yes. No, glad to have all of them. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jyoti.
So one thing I noticed was it looks with the lighting, it looks in the 3 dimension as a pyramid. So you can, you can go into the mythology of the pyramid shape.
Yes, I don't want to go into mythology too much, but I want to comment on the three-dimensional. I mean, I was very pleased. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jyoti.
By mythology is the wrong word. I guess the origin of because that pyramid shape is in many old cultures, not just in the Egyptian culture.
I'm not trying to replicate that. The thing is, firstly, I said, firstly, I did not have this separation. I just had a line, okay? Then I used a different shape. I said, look, I have to make some distinction between what is you and what is not you, what is others. And so I said I would overlay something. And I was stunned actually to find that it produced this 3D effect. And it actually makes sense because it's like there's something in the front that you are almost always directly aware of, and then something that is there, but it's in the background. And you have to pay attention to that. So I thought it worked very well, but I'm not trying to do anything with pyramid at all.
Yeah, no, I understand that you're not trying to. However, it's there. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So or you're not trying to, but it appeared to you.
Wonderful.
So if you go into the intuition of it, there's obviously something calling out.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
There's a pyramid, the history of pyramids calling out to you.
Thank you.
Or to us. That's all I mean by that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is go ahead. Your other point?
Can I just point out one more thing?
Sure.
It is that someone else mentioned this too, was that everything is linear. And that's, I think we as humans, well, I hate to make such generalized comments, but it's not generalized, but I'm just trying to say it in a way that's kind of what we know, which is that we see lines and arcs, and that's what creates most of our alphabet. In almost, there's nothing but line and arcs.
Got it.
And from arc, you can create all other shapes in language.
Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti.
So if you were to put time in there, I think time is your arc, which is missing in this linear figure. Okay, sorry for taking so much time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Folks, let's be a little bit briefer so we can get to as much as possible. Next up is Jeannie. Jeannie, what's your question?
Well, I just made an observation that the word virtue that you have brought to bear is a word that I have not heard people use much at all, if ever, these days. So it's very interesting that you are focusing and dissecting the concept of the word virtue. It'll be interesting to see how you handle the word virtue. I'm interested to.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie. Actually, virtue throughout history has been a very large word. Actually, large part of philosophical thought has been focused on the concept of virtue. And it is actually very unusual that we are not talking much about virtue. And to the extent to which we're talking about it in a very narrow way of saying, oh, this person is sleeping around, so they are not virtuous. So it is regarded in a very narrow context. And in the tradition of Western thought and Eastern thought and Indian thought and in Chinese thought, it's a very large concept. And that is something that we have missed. And this that's exactly what we're trying to retrieve. Thank you. So Jeannie, sorry, you had others? Any other point? Folks, anybody else?
I accidentally muted myself. I didn't realize I muted myself. You know, that's the thing. It's just that I have not heard that word being used at all. I just like, oh, it's like, I almost felt like it was an archaic word, but that it's very interesting that you're bringing this word to light and to examine it and to dissect it. And so it's very nice. It's good.
Thank you, Ginny. And that is exactly what we do in 52 Living Ideas. The way we are studying the Bible, the way we are studying the Gita, the way we are studying the Tao Te Ching, we are bringing in many things. We are going through Aquinas' commentary on Gospel of John. All of these things are actually retrieving something from the past, which is crucial to human beings, which the modern world is not focusing on. And it is a significant value to human beings to do that. And that is exactly what the entire 52 Living Ideas is about. And that's what we're going to do with virtue. Next up is Brian Nelson, followed by Jeff. Brian.
Shrikant, could you please go over at the very beginning when you put that chart up, what is virtue? And I think you said something about 4 different characteristics or something, but I only heard 3.
Sure.
So could you just redefine virtue?
Let me do one thing. I have a whole presentation on this, Penny. That's what I'm going to do tomorrow at 9 p.m. I'm going to I'm going to say not only what I think of virtue is, but what everybody in history has thought about what virtue is. What are all these questions? I'm going to give the answers of everybody first, and then have everybody talk about it. So that would be I would recommend that. That would be the best way of looking at it, because it's such a deep, deep question. I don't want to do injustice to it. Make sense?
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks. Next up is Jeff.
Hi, Shrikant. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So first of all, good Lord, Shrikant. I'm so impressed with what you're doing here. And thank you for that. And what a wonderful Happy New Year that is.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Second, I am so there with you with regard to the virtues and the need to focus on that in the world. And I'm very impressed that your slide for virtues, if you could put that back up for just a second. I'm very impressed that this focus on virtues is questions, because I'm a big fan of questions.
No. This is just a start.
I know,
Jeff,
but
I'm going to give you a short preview here. Let me see if I can find it. Give me just a second. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Please go on. I'll bring it up. Go ahead.
So, in my personal reflections, as well as my work with others, the questions are a wonderful way to engage in these kinds of reflections and interactions. So just the discipline of it is a very powerful thing. Next, I'm very impressed, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your fifth factor or element or dimension, however you think of it. But the movement from 4 to 5 is, I think, actually revolutionary, and so I'm very interested in that. I think I'm sure you find that consistent with my orientations and questions over the years. And then last, I just want to go back to Brian's. I want to say that yes, and I know you know this, that the incorporation of time, given that, you know, its respect and regard for change is huge. And that's all I have to say about it at this time. But I again, just, you know, thank you for doing this. It's really quite a remarkable, you know, movement forward, continuing progress.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. And what we're going to do is that on virtues, and especially Joe is going to be very delighted with this, is I'm going into virtues in a big way. So this is, today was just like a preview. So tomorrow I'm going to doing this presentation. So this is the table of content, and you know, these are various conception of virtues and how it has changed over time. How do you acquire virtue? What is virtue? What are the cardinal virtues? Are they one or many? What is justice? What are theological virtues? What is the good of virtue? What is virtue and happiness? So that's what is coming up tomorrow. Terrific. And I'm going to do the same thing for all the virtues. So I'm going to do that for justice. Justice will probably be the next. And then for courage, then for prudence, then for temperance, and then for theological virtues. I have to figure out how to do the theological virtues. And what I'm finding, and this is interesting that Ginny brought it up, and many people brought it up. You know, Rupali brought it up in her own way. Everybody brought it up in their own way, that this is not really what people focus on, but this is what we should focus on. And this is what human beings need to focus on. And that's what is, you know, we're trying to bring that back. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use the great resource that is Syntopicon and the great books, where I can very easily separate out what the ancients have said versus moderns have said. And just let us, just like we're looking at the Bible, just like we're looking at Tao Te Ching, let us look at what ancients had to say about virtue before this concept died. The concept is dead. Okay, it has narrowed up to a point where it is no longer what it was. The same has happened to the concept of happiness. Same has happened to the concept of beauty and perhaps truth. So it is very interesting to kind of going back. All right. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark if you have any further questions. I'm happy to take any more questions if anybody has. Otherwise, I'm going to ask people if they have any. Okay, first, so questions first. Jyoti, go ahead. Jyoti Marwa.
Okay. Shrikant, yes, I think Jeff said it all. It was a tremendous job you did here explaining. And I have always said you have to have a foundation in life. You can't just stay helter-skelter. Now, my question is, in a society which is where the community is so divisive, I think, can something like this bring people together? Because there is a connection here. You had talked about Tao, you talked about Gita, you talked about Bible.
Right.
So this can bring the community together. This can actually unite everybody. Do you think if this kind of a thing is introduced at a higher level in the society, people will look at life a little differently? And they will say, this is really bringing people, making them understand that we are all the same. You could be coming from any ethnic background, but there is a form, there is a function.
Absolutely. You know, that's the whole, I mean, I completely agree with you. I think that is the potential that I see. I mean, if you look at it, we have been doing that with 52 Living Ideas. You know, people come here with all kinds of different backgrounds, with all kinds of different views, all kinds of different ages. And all of us are able to interact at a level with strangers in a way that is not possible, or which is extremely hard and rare in the world. And what this is doing is that it is about developing common knowledge. Common knowledge is right here. Common context, in the sense that now 52 living ideas means you can come here at a time, 9 p.m. on weekdays, and you can always get that. And there is common knowledge. And what that does is that it produces a commonality of feeling and commonality of pushing towards the highest idea. And that's what actually holds, holds things together. I mean, you can see it on a small scale in this community now, as in the beginning of this meetup, before the meetup started, you pointed out. And I do think that has potential of scaling. And definitely that's something that's well worth doing. So thank you, Jyoti. If you want any follow-up, let me know. Okay. All right. Now, I would like to know how the presentation went. What I'm planning to do is that I think I've just begun to introduce this diagram. There is a lot more to be said about this. This is actually bringing together of many things I have been thinking about, as well as many things that, Rupali, go ahead.
Shrikant, you mentioned that you've been thinking about this for many years, right? And I've seen your chart of all the 4 elements with different philosophies and different approaches that you have put together. Can you elaborate on those? Like, how do you view the various ideas? And I don't know if you would be able to share that chart to kind of say, how do these 4 elements work for various functions or various approaches?
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do a full meetup on that next weekend. I'll probably do it next Sunday, maybe around 2 o'clock or something like that. What I'm going to do is, this is just the beginning.
So let me ask you a follow-up question then. Then, when you look at different approaches, whether it's OODA loop or Montessori, or you look at Christianity, or if you look at Savitri, how do you identify what is an element in each of those that fit into these 4 categories?
Right. I mean, what I can do is that I can start. I mean, I've done already much of this work. The interesting thing is that all of these people actually identified themselves. So let me take the example of OODA loop and Marshall McLuhan. Okay. So John Boyd himself says there is observe, orient, decide, and act. Okay. What are you observing? Observing is, and then what all I'm doing is that I'm seeing that the 4-4 division that he's talking about is similar to the 4-4 divisions that other people have done. And I'm putting it in the map that I have. So next time I will share. So let me actually do that. Let me just do that as a quick preview, and I will go into details of it next time. So I'll talk meanwhile as I bring up the spreadsheet, the presentation. Give me just a second. I'm going to stop sharing this. And let's see, give me a second. So for example, when you're looking at, okay, give me a second here. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, just coming up, trying to give you the best example here. So I did a meetup called the 4-Fold Path. And this is the slide that I'd used over there. Okay, let me bring it up here. you know what? I'm going to go back to this one. Okay, so what I'd done is that for different things, so for example, the first one was about communication. This is about questions. The next one is about Marshall McLuhan. The next one is about John Boyd. Next one is on Sullivan. Next one is on Aristotle. Next one is on philosophy. Next one is on the yogas, Indian thinking. The next one is my version of Carl Jung's functions. And the next one is on the Bible. So what I've done is that I noticed these patterns in each of them. And these patterns, each of those people would say, yes, those are the patterns. So they are not controversial as far as they are concerned. You know, they would say, yes, these are the patterns. And what all I'm doing is that I'm seeing that the patterns that they have identified are same as the patterns that other people have identified. So for example, let me work through two examples here. So in case of OODA loop, it's saying observe, which is the green, orient, which is the blue, decide, which is the yellow, and act, which is the red. Marshall McLuhan, he has these four things. He's saying you're retrieving something, any tool, it retrieves something. So that is from the past of what it can do. It's an intuitive function. Then you're enhancing it. And that is thinking it out and actually making the tool. You're displacing, you're actually using that tool on the world to displace and make changes that displaces previous things. And then he warns on flipping. That means you get too attached to the tool, so it goes away from to the original purpose. So that's how it fits in. So to answer your question, the core observations come from that field itself. And all I do then is to go ahead and see the similarities between that and others. And that makes each of these quadrants more powerful, because I or anybody else can see different aspects of each of those things. Next, I want to tell you about what I'm planning to do with this. And then I want your feedback on the meetup. So what I'm going to do is, this is just, screen is blank. Sorry about that. I don't need this.
That was before.
Before. Okay.
Now
okay.
we can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm going to do, let me see if this works. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take this diagram and really expand what it can do. Ultimately, what I realized is that I've been working on these four functions for some time. But for the first time, I'm able to bring them together and say, how do they actually interact to become one? So that's why I call it the name, this one, Quinqwe Unum. So in 5-1. So I'm going to use that as a theme, and I'm going to go through many things. The primary focus is to integrate that with virtue, because what I realize is that the same theme actually plays out in the virtue in the great conversation. So I have many, many, many thinkers talking about virtues. I've given you a quick preview of that. So I'm going to, this Sunday, that is tomorrow at 9 p.m., I'm going to be talking about virtue itself. Not only the questions, but all the answers that have been presented by all the thinkers. And then apply it in detail to this diagram. I will do the same thing with the 4 cardinal virtues, one by one. I will also keep on saying, okay, how do I need to move this diagram further and keep working on that? So that's the plan. All right. So now I would like any feedback that you would like to give on this meetup.
Excuse me, Shrikant, may I ask one question before you move forward?
Very, very quick. Go ahead.
I had an exclamation point, but I don't think you saw it. So do you see any hierarchy here? Or is there?
Okay, so it's a very deep question, Jyoti. And what happens is that everybody else has actually listened to many of my presentations, and they are using the question. So there is a deep hierarchy, and I'll be exploring all the hierarchies as we go on. Okay?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to see your reaction when I used the word hierarchy. That was my only purpose.
No, there are lots of hierarchies. There are lots of relations. They're very complex relations. Hierarchies in each of the system is different. Like, for example, the Bible, the hierarchy goes like this: yellow, blue, green, red. In Tao, the hierarchy goes yellow, red, green, and then maybe blue, something like that. So each of the hierarchies is different. I don't know how to exactly put it in other forms, but hierarchy is a very deep question, and we'll be dealing with that in multiple ways going forward. So folks, any feedback on this meetup? If you've, how did it go? Was it easy to understand? Was it difficult? Any thoughts? Joe?
Yeah, I thought it actually really built nicely on last week's presentation. And it led in nicely into how we're going to be covering virtue. So I think this is actually a perfect setup, in my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up is DLJ, followed by Ambika. DLJ.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely. Thanks for the presentation. I'm going to pick up on something that Brian Nelson said. He said he helped him sleep well for a week. I had the opposite effect on me. I had a sleepless week because my own 4+ year project, there are some similarities, but there's quite a lot of differences. So I've been sort of questioning my whole essence. So thanks for that. I made a couple of pages worth of notes on the previous presentation. Quite a lot of which was on the diagrams itself, and you've changed the diagrams, so thanks. Most of the notes are therefore relevant. What I think I'll do, rather than going through the whole lot, because it'll take a while, I'll put it in the notes. I'll put it in the comment box for the. Yeah, I'll write them up. It's probably easy to for me to rethink them through. Now the diagrams have changed as well. So. But yeah, food for thought, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, DLJ, that's a very high compliment. Okay, both being able to sleep well and being sleepless because of something is high praise. Both of them are high praises, and I really appreciate all. It's like that's exactly what I want people to do, because what this is that this is like the summation of everything that I've been thinking about. And this is kind of putting everything together, and you are dealing with it exactly. So no matter what differences we may have, engaging it at that level is the right, is the valuable thing to do. Now you're welcome to send me email if you want. If you want to ask a couple of questions, you can do that too. So how about this? Take a little bit of time. I'm going to have other people talk about what they got from the meetup, and then I'll come to you. Go ahead, Dilaj.
Just a quick, I'll write it up, but my main question is about the methodology, so that's quite a long conversation. I often get, I don't know what the right word is, acolytes, students, whatever, submitting something like a poem to me with a kind of, "Ooh, what do you think?" And the first question I always ask them is, what are you after here? Encouragement or critique, or both? So same question to you.
So currently, none of the above. I just want your impression about whether it was clear. And all the other, because the thing is that the clarity is the most important thing. Any other feedback, it's better to give by email.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that what it looks like you have very elaborate things to say. And what happens is that
then you change the diagram. So
what's that?
I said I did have a lot of stuff, but then you changed the diagram. So
no,
it's
but
like
everything, all of those would be still applicable. I will still take all the questions. But what happens is that methodology is a very deep point. And there are very significant differences in methodology. And I find that the modern methodology is very different from the ancient methodology or the scribal methodology. The methodology I'm using or I'm trying to use is the scribal sensibility of this.
Well, that's indeed one of the questions is how would then that, are you therefore limiting your audience to those who already appreciate that is kind of where I was going to go.
Right. Yeah. So the point is that it's like the question of virtues. Okay.
Yeah.
It is true that the modern conversation is not about virtues because the concept of virtue has been reduced to a point of being a complete caricature of itself and is denigrated and is not important in the conversation at all. It doesn't change the fact that for human beings, virtues are important. Similarly, the methods that the moderns use, they are very, very excited about the methods that they use. And all of them are very small parts of the method that was used before and which have been expanded dramatically in different ways. And so in some ways, this entire project is opposed to not only the content of the focus of what moderns are trying or what moderns are focusing on about human beings, but also how they are focusing on. So it's a very large project and it's best dealt with by email. And I'm happy to do that. And I'm going to, part of it is that it is in the incipient stage. I'm just beginning this. It'll take me about 10 such meetups to fully flesh out what I'm saying. So I would rather do it that way. So thank you, DLG, but I really appreciate. Thank you very much. Next up is going to be Ambika, followed by Brian Nelson. Ambika. Ambika, you need to unmute.
Great idea. Okay. So I forget what your question is because we've been discussing other things. But
so the question is, what did you get from this meetup? How was it?
Okay, that's what I'm answering. So it's really timely because many of us have been working towards, our vision. And here we are in 2022, where we have to be creating anew all over all the things we've been working with. So I think it's really foundational and also stirs the imagination.
Thank you.
And and therefore this cake, you have to all come and eat it. It's a brand new recipe. I designed it. I never use mixes.
Yes, there is a Zoom plugin that allows you to transfer cake over this one. So yeah, just try to download it so that everybody can have it. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Brian Nelson. Brian.
Okay.
So again, as the last time, I'm very grateful. Also, as some have said, I'm very impressed. It's really a very welcome breakthrough, and I'm looking forward to the evolution and the kind of the rolling out, revelation of all of this. In addition to sleeping, I will be eating and exercising this weekend. I'd like to keep in shape for my sessions on 52 living ideas.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. And Brian, I didn't get to respond to what you said yesterday about the Bible, that you're getting significant value from what we are doing. And that's a very high praise actually coming from you, because I know that you have read Bible in multiple languages. You have studied it for a long time. And so really thank you for that. And I do think that, we are onto something of just going back So this is all about retrieval. This is like taking in knowledge at a large level. It's about retrieval. It is about saying that there was a time where people had grasped something better than what we do now. And we are simply going back and trying to get that back and not losing it. And we are going to it in its original without using any kind of intermediaries modern intermediaries who have all kinds of agendas of their own. But when you let these works speak to you and engage them in a way which is how it was supposed to be engaged. Like, for example, that's exactly the same thing I'm planning to do with virtues. Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, they were talking to these people, young people in Athens, about what virtue is. What was that like? And, Aquinas was doing the same thing. What was that like? And how did they actually listen to that? And how did they actually process that? That is such a different context from how we are even reading about these things. You just say, okay, this person is arguing this person is arguing that. That's very different. So exactly what you pointed out in Bible, we are doing the same thing here with everything. So thank you so much. All right, folks, thank you for joining us to start the new year right. And there are 2 meetups on tomorrow that I want to invite you for. The first one is the Gospel of John at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We are going to be covering the entire Gospel. We're going to be reading it. It takes about 2 hours to read it. So what we're going to do is that we're going to read it chapter by chapter. And after each chapter, we'll have brief comments from anybody who wants to make brief comments. Typically, I would recommend read the verses, 1 verse or 2 verses that you liked, and say something about it. That's it. And then we'll move on to the next chapter. We'll cover it in about 3 hours or so. So that's at 2 o'clock. And then we are going to go at 9 o'clock. We are going to do this meetup on virtue. This is virtue, 103 great ideas. Actually, these are incredible meetups. Okay, this is what I started my meetups with. So 52 Living Ideas used to be called 103 Great Ideas meetups. I went through about 50 of these ideas in person in New York. If you have not experienced it, you can look at, I think I have several of the meetups, few of the meetups online, but they are incredible because these topics like virtue is what we need, each of us. These questions are the questions that have been raised by all thinkers across history about virtue. And I will also be presenting all the core answers. And then that will be just the setup so we can actually discuss this together. Each of those questions that I raised, we'll get to discuss it together. All right, so that's what is coming up. Jyoti, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Do you recommend that I come tomorrow at 2 o'clock session because I have not been attending in the past the gospel?
Yes, I would recommend that. It would be a good way of getting an overview of the gospel. Okay. The works, just like Gita or Dao De Jing, are very accessible to people. And people will be reading the gospel, and people will be reading the gospel and talking about what it means to them. All right. Anybody else wants to make any comment? Okay.
Can I just say something? I have enjoyed this very much. And as you were talking, I was kind of translating that or how it would apply to the work that I do. And I've been able to make a few integrated solutions to some of the questions I had personally for my work. So thank you. This was very helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you.
My thing is, how do I apply it? it's great to understand it, but if I can't apply it, then I feel I'm missing something.
Absolutely. What I'm trying to do is that I try to apply it to these meetups itself as a way of, and because that's a very quick feedback loop for me. So I would say, okay, let's say justice. How can I be just in this context? And how does principle of justice? So that means that everybody is able to learn at the maximum level, and everybody is treated justly in the context of doing that. So how do you do that? How do you apply the principle of courage in this context? How do you apply the principle of temperance? All of that. And this is all, so that is the primary thing that I use, because the feedback loop is very, very fast. All right, folks, thank you very much. We will see you next time. Tomorrow, hopefully.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.